The parking lot was almost empty. It was 11:47 at night, and the Walmart on Crescent Avenue was winding down. A few tired workers pushed carts across the asphalt. A man loaded groceries into a minivan near the entrance. And under a pale yellow streetlight, a sleek black Mercedes sat alone in the far corner. Engine running. Hazard lights blinking slowly, like a heartbeat. Inside that car, Vanessa Thompson was on the phone. "James, I'm fine," she said, tucking a bag of groceries onto the passenger seat. "I just needed creamer. I'll be home in 10 minutes. She laughed at something her husband said. It was a warm laugh, the kind that comes easy after 17 years of marriage. She ended the call, dropped her phone into the cup holder, and reached for her keys. That's when the blue and red lights flooded her rear-view mirror. She hadn't moved the car yet. She hadn't done anything. The Mercedes was parked, engine on, hazard lights blinking. But the police cruiser had pulled up directly behind her, blocking her in, and the lights were spinning like she'd just run a red light at 90 miles an hour. Vanessa went still, not from fear, from instinct. She had been a federal prosecutor for 11 years. She had walked into rooms full of dangerous men and never blinked. She knew what a power move looked like, and she knew, the way you know when the temperature in a room drops, that this was not a routine check. She kept her hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. The officer took his time getting out of the cruiser. That was intentional, too. He stood by his door for a moment, stretching, looking around the parking lot like he owned it. Then he walked toward her, slow, heavy steps, thumbs hooked into his belt, and tapped on her window with one knuckle. She rolled it down. "Evening," he said. He was a big man, pale, with a thick jaw and small eyes that moved over a car like he was pricing it. His badge read SGT D. Mitchell. He had the look of a man who had never once been told no and couldn't imagine a world where that changed. "License and registration," he said. "No, ma'am. No explanation. Just a demand, flat and casual, the way you'd ask someone to pass the salt." "Of course," Vanessa said. Her voice was calm, professionally calm, the kind of calm she used in courtrooms when she wanted a witness to underestimate her. She reached slowly into the glove compartment, retrieved the documents, and handed them over without a word. Mitchell looked at them for a long time, longer than necessary. "You know why I stopped you?" he asked. "I'm not sure I was moving," Vanessa said. Something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of irritation. He wasn't used to being answered like that, precise, unbothered, correct. "Hazard lights," he said. "You can't just park anywhere with hazard lights on. Creates confusion." It was a lie, and they both knew it. There was no such ordinance. She was in a marked parking space, in an open lot, at midnight. But Vanessa didn't argue. She nodded slightly, the way you nod when you're storing information rather than agreeing with it. What Mitchell didn't see, what he couldn't see, was that Vanessa's left hand, resting casually near the center console, had already activated the small digital recorder she kept in her bag. A habit from work. A habit that was about to change everything. "You been drinking tonight?" Mitchell asked. "No," she said. "You sure about that? Because your eyes look a little." "I haven't been drinking, Sergeant Mitchell." The use of his name made him pause, just for a second. Then the small eyes narrowed and the jaw tightened, and he leaned slightly closer to the window. "You got a real smart mouth, don't you?" he said. And then, quietly like it was a joke between friends, he added something that turned the air in the car to ice. He used a word, an old, ugly word that had been used for centuries to make people feel like they were less than human. He said it softly. He said it with a smile. Vanessa didn't move. She didn't flinch. She breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, and she let the recorder catch every single syllable. Then Mitchell straightened up and got a business. "Here's the thing," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I could run your plates right now and find all kinds of problems. Registration issues, outstanding violations. You know how easy it is for paperwork to get complicated." He tilted his head. "Or we could keep this simple. You seem like a smart woman, smart enough to know that some problems are cheaper to solve tonight than tomorrow." He was asking for money, right there in a Walmart parking lot, under a yellow light, in a city where he wore a badge and carried a gun. He was asking a woman he thought was defenseless to pay him to leave her alone. Vanessa looked at him for a long moment. "I understand," she said quietly. And she did. She understood everything. She understood that this was not the first time he had done this. She understood from the practiced smoothness of his words that he had a system. She understood that somewhere out there, other women who didn't have 11 years in federal court, women who didn't have a recorder in their bag, had paid him and driven home shaking. She understood that tonight was going to be the last time. "Give me a moment," she said, reaching for her purse slowly. Mitchell smiled and stepped back from the window, satisfied. He glanced around the parking lot with the easy confidence of a man who had never once faced a consequence in his life. He didn't notice that her hands were completely still. He didn't notice that she wasn't reaching for cash. He didn't notice that she was looking at him the way a chess player looks at a piece they've already decided to sacrifice. Not with anger, not with fear, but with the quiet, terrible patience of someone who already knows how the game ends. She looked up at him and said very calmly, "I think I have everything I need. Have a good night, Sergeant." Mitchell blinked, and for just one moment, one small, flickering moment, something moved across his face that might have been unease. But it passed quickly, replaced by the usual arrogance, and he laughed and tapped the roof of her car and walked back to his cruiser like a man without a care in the world. He drove away. Vanessa sat in the parking lot for exactly 3 minutes. She didn't cry. She didn't call James. Not yet. She just sat very still in the yellow light, her hands resting on the wheel, the recorder humming quietly in her bag. Then she picked up her phone and opened a new document. At the top, she typed 3 words. "Case file, Mitchell." And she began. James Thompson was still awake when she got home. He was at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and a stack of internal reports he'd been meaning to read since Tuesday. He was that kind of man, the kind who brought work home not because he had to, but because he genuinely couldn't stop thinking about it. 17 years of marriage, and Vanessa still found it equal parts admirable and exhausting. She walked through the front door at 12:23 in the morning, set her grocery bag on the counter, and stood in the kitchen doorway looking at him. He looked up, and he knew immediately. Not because she was crying. She wasn't. Not because she looked broken. She didn't. James Thompson had been married to this woman long enough to know that her danger wasn't in falling apart. Her danger was in going completely, unnervingly quiet. She was very quiet right now. "Sit down," she said. "I need you to listen to something." She placed a recorder on the table between them. She pressed play. And for the next 4 minutes and 17 seconds, James Thompson sat absolutely still while a man's voice filled his kitchen, lazy, confident, poisonous. And that word, came through the small speaker like a slap that landed in slow motion. When it ended, the kitchen was silent. James didn't explode. He didn't slam the table or raise his voice. He was also, in his own way, a dangerous kind of quiet. He was regional chief of internal affairs, and he had spent 15 years learning that rage without strategy was just noise. He reached across the table and took his wife's hand and held it for a long moment. Then he said, "Tell me everything, every detail. Don't leave anything out." So she did, and while she talked, James listened the way he always listened, with his full body, completely still, eyes focused, absorbing every word like each one was evidence. Because to him, right now it was... By the time she finished, it was almost 2 in the morning. James stood up and walked to the window and looked out at the dark street for a long moment. Then he turned around. "Mitchell," he said. "Sergeant Danny Mitchell, 3rd Precinct. You know him?" Vanessa asked. "I know of him." James came back to the table and sat down. "His name came across my desk 8 months ago. Complaint from a woman. Stopped late at night. Pressure for cash. No arrest made. Complaint later withdrawn." He paused. "And 6 months before that, another one. Different woman. Same story. Complaint withdrawn." Vanessa felt something cold settle in her chest. "They withdrew because he scared them into it," she said. "Or paid them," James said. "Or both." He looked at the recorder. But this time he picked someone who recorded him. This time he picked the wrong woman, Vanessa said. James almost smiled. Almost. I need to make a call, he said. The call was to Rebecca Torres. Rebecca was FBI, Organized Crime and Public Corruption Unit, and she and James had worked 3 cases together over the past 5 years. She was compact, razor-sharp, and had the particular energy of someone who had been waiting a long time for exactly this kind of phone call. When James reached her at 2:14 in the morning, she picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me," she said. He talked. She listened, and when he finished, she was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "Send me the recording," she said, "and don't touch Mitchell yet. Don't go near him. Don't let anyone in your department breathe in his direction." "Why?" James asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Because," Rebecca said, "if Mitchell has been running this for 2 years and those complaints kept disappearing, he's not doing it alone. Someone above him is cleaning up. We touch him now, we get 1 man. We wait, we build a map, we get the whole network." James looked at Vanessa across the kitchen table. Vanessa nodded once. "How long do you need?" James asked. "Give me 72 hours, Rebecca said. "I'll come to you." She arrived in 60. Rebecca Torres walked into the Thompsons' home office on a Tuesday afternoon with a laptop, 2 external hard drives, and a look on her face that said she had not slept more than 4 hours since the phone call. She set everything up on the dining room table that Vanessa had cleared for the purpose, and then she turned the laptop around so they could see the screen. "Meet the pattern," Rebecca said. What they saw made Vanessa's blood go cold, not from fear, but from particular fury of recognition, because laid out on that screen was a timeline. 14 months, 23 incidents. All of them followed the same shape. Late-night traffic stops, women alone. Expensive cars, pressure, payment, silence. The women range in age from 22 to 58. They were teachers, nurses, business owners, graduate students. Most of them were black. All of them had been targeted in the same 3-mile radius of the city's wealthiest residential corridor, the area where women driving nice cars at midnight were most likely to be alone and most likely to have cash. "He was hunting," Vanessa said flatly. "Systematically," Rebecca confirmed, "and he wasn't alone." She pulled up a second screen, a network map, names connected by lines, badges, and ranks attached to each node. "We've identified at least 6 officers directly involved. Another 11 who we believe knew and said nothing. 1 lieutenant who we think was taking a cut." James leaned forward. 17 officers. "At minimum," Rebecca said. "And the complaints that disappeared? 3 of them were handled by the same desk sergeant. Same person every time. It wasn't coincidence. It was protocol. Their protocol." The room was very quiet for a moment. Vanessa stood up and walked to the window, the same window James had stood at 2 nights ago. She looked out at the neighborhood, the clean street, the ordinary Tuesday afternoon, going on outside like nothing had happened. Somewhere out there, right now, Sergeant Mitchell was probably in his cruiser, probably circling, probably looking for the next woman, alone in a nice car at the wrong hour. She turned around. "How we bring it all down at once?" she asked. "All of them. No warning. No one gets to run." Rebecca smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. It was a small, precise smile, the smile of someone who had been building toward this exact question. "That's where you come in," she said, looking at Vanessa. "You're a federal prosecutor. You can get us the warrants. You know the judges. And you have something even better than evidence." "What's that?" Vanessa asked. "You have him on tape offering a bribe to an officer of the court," Rebecca said. "That's not just a corruption charge. That's federal. That's mandatory minimum. That's the kind of charge that makes lieutenants start talking very, very fast to avoid sharing a cell with a man they were covering for." James leaned back in his chair and looked at his wife with something that might have been awe if they hadn't been together long enough for him to simply call it what it was: pride. "So we let him keep going," Vanessa said slowly. "Let him feel safe. Let him keep talking." "He's already talking," Rebecca said, turning her laptop around again. On the screen was a screenshot, a private Facebook group, members only, badge emoji in the name. She zoomed in on a post from 3 days ago. It was Mitchell, bragging, not in plain language. There was a code to it, the casual shorthand of men who believe they're untouchable. But to trained eyes, it was perfectly readable. He was describing a stop, a woman, a payout. He had used laughing emojis. Vanessa stared at the screen for a long moment. "He thinks he won," she said quietly. "Yes," Rebecca said. "Good," Vanessa said. "Let him keep thinking that." She sat back down at the table, pulled her notepad close, and uncapped her pen. Her handwriting was small and extremely precise, the handwriting of someone who had learned long ago that the details were everything. "Tell me about the ceremony," she said. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "What ceremony?" "Mitchell's commendation," James said, the realization crossing his face. "He's scheduled to receive a community service award at the mayor's public safety ceremony 2 weeks from Saturday." The three of them looked at each other, and slowly, in the quiet dining room on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the shape of something extraordinary began to form. Mitchell had spent 2 years building a stage for himself, a stage of power and impunity and arrogance and noise. He had built it plank by plank, in parking lots, in complaint forms, and disappearing files. He had no idea that he had just built the perfect stage for his own destruction. Vanessa capped her pen and looked up. "Then that's where we end it," she said. The morning of the ceremony was beautiful. Clear sky, warm sun, the kind of Saturday that makes a city feel like it's showing off. The mayor's public safety ceremony was held every year in Riverside Plaza, an open-air venue with white chairs arranged in neat rows, a podium draped in the city's colors, and a stage wide enough to fit a full police honor guard. Local news cameras were already set up along the sides. A reporter from Channel 7 was doing a test run of her opening lines. Someone was adjusting a microphone that kept producing feedback every time the wind shifted. It was exactly the kind of event that looked like justice from the outside. Sergeant Danny Mitchell arrived at 9:15 in the morning, 45 minutes early, dressed in his full ceremonial uniform. He had polished his badge himself the night before. He had practiced, in the mirror, the particular expression he planned to wear when they called his name, humble but deserving, the look of a man who had earned something and knew it. He shook hands near the entrance with 2 other officers who clapped him on the back. He accepted a coffee from a junior officer who seemed nervous around him, which Mitchell enjoyed, quietly, the way he enjoyed most things that confirmed his place in the order of the world. He found his seat in the front row, crossed one leg over the other, and looked out at the plaza filling with people. He felt, in a word, untouchable. He had felt that way for 2 years. Maybe longer. It was a feeling that had grown slowly, fed by every complaint that disappeared, every woman who drove away shaking, every lieutenant who looked the other way and said nothing. Power, when nobody challenges it, starts to feel like a natural condition, like gravity, like weather, like something that simply is and always will be. Mitchell sipped his coffee and watched the cameras and thought about how good he was going to look on the evening news. He did not notice the woman, in the gray blazer, sitting 4 rows behind him. He did not notice the man in the dark suit near the side entrance, speaking quietly into an earpiece. He did not notice the 3 unmarked vehicles parked on the street, just beyond the plaza entrance, or the 6 federal agents inside them who had been there since 7 in the morning. And he absolutely did not notice Vanessa Thompson, sitting in the 3rd row on the opposite side of the aisle, in a deep burgundy dress, hands folded in her lap, watching him with the calm, patient eyes of a woman who had been waiting 2 weeks for this exact moment. The ceremony began at 10 o'clock sharp. The mayor spoke first, a broad man with a broad voice who loved moments like this, loved the cameras and the uniforms and the feeling of standing in front of a city and representing its best version of itself. He talked about community. He talked about service. He talked about the men and women who kept the city safe every single night. Mitchell nodded along from the front row. Then came the commendations. 3 officers received awards before Mitchell's name was called. Each one walked up, shook hands, posed for a photo, returned to their seat. The crowd applauded politely each time. Everything was moving exactly as planned. Then the mayor leaned into the microphone and said, "And our final commendation this morning goes to Sergeant Daniel Mitchell of the 3rd Precinct for outstanding community service and—" He stopped, not because he had lost his place, not because of the wind or the microphone feedback. He stopped because a woman had stood up in the 3rd row, and the woman was walking toward the stage, and there was something about the way she walked, unhurried, precise, completely certain, that made the mayor's words dissolve in his throat. Vanessa stepped onto the stage. For one bewildering second, nobody moved. Mitchell turned in his seat and saw her, and his face went through 5 expressions in 3 seconds: confusion, recognition, irritation, and then something much darker that he quickly tried to bury under a forced smile. "Ma'am," the mayor said, half into the microphone, "this isn't." "My name is Vanessa Thompson," she said, her voice clear and steady and loud enough to reach every camera in the plaza. "I am a federal prosecutor specializing in crimes against public administration, and I am here because 14 days ago, Sergeant Daniel Mitchell stopped my vehicle in a parking lot, used a racial slur, and solicited a bribe." The plaza went absolutely silent. Not the polite silence of an audience waiting for the next speaker. The stunned, airless silence of a crowd that has just watched the ground shift beneath their feet. Mitchell stood up. That is completely... "I have the recording," Vanessa said. She reached into her blazer pocket and held up a small device, the same recorder, the same one from the parking lot. And she placed it carefully on the podium. And then she pressed play. Mitchell's voice came out of the speakers, the same lazy, confident, poisonous voice. And that word, moved through the open air of Riverside Plaza and landed on every person in every white chair like a stone dropped from a great height. Then his voice said, "You seem like a smart woman. Smart enough to know that some problems are cheaper to solve tonight than tomorrow." The recording ended. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. Rebecca Torres emerged from the side entrance, badge visible, moving with quiet authority toward the front of the plaza. Behind her came 2 federal agents. From the street beyond the entrance, the unmarked vehicles opened their doors. Mitchell turned left, then right, then back toward the stage, and found that every direction he looked, there was someone walking toward him with the same expression. Calm, prepared, and completely finished with waiting. James Thompson appeared at the edge of the stage. He looked at his wife first, just for a moment, just long enough for something private to pass between them, and then he looked at Mitchell with the level, steady gaze of a man whose patience had run its full course. "Sergeant Mitchell," Rebecca said, reaching him, badge in hand, "you are under arrest for extortion, solicitation of bribe, and violations of federal civil rights statutes. You have the right to remain silent." Mitchell opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The cameras caught all of it. The handcuffs, the badge being removed, the walk across the plaza past the white chairs and the silent crowd, and the mayor who stood at the podium looking like a man watching a building collapse in slow motion. Channel 7 was broadcasting live. Someone in the crowd was filming on their phone. Within 40 minutes, the video was everywhere. Every platform, every feed, every corner of the internet, where people went to feel something. And people felt something. They felt a great deal. What happened next moved faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours of the arrest, Rebecca's federal task force executed warrants on 6 officers directly linked to the extortion network. Within a week, the lieutenant who had been taking a cut had hired a lawyer and begun cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced charge, which meant he was talking, and talking fast, and every word out of his mouth was pulling another thread loose from a web that turned out to be bigger than even Rebecca had mapped. By the end of the first month, 17 officers were under federal scrutiny. 2 had resigned. 4 were suspended without pay pending investigation. The desk sergeant who had processed the disappeared complaints was placed on administrative leave and later charged with obstruction. And the women started coming forward. That was the part nobody had fully anticipated. Not the speed of it, not the number. Once the story broke, once the recording played on every news channel, and the arrest footage circulated on every platform, something that had been locked inside, a lot of people came loose. Women called the federal tip line. Women sent emails. Women who had driven home shaking from late-night parking lots and convinced themselves it was safer to say nothing. They found their voices, one by one, then in groups, then in a flood. 43 victims in the first 2 weeks. 91 by the end of the month. Hundreds before the investigation formally closed. Vanessa read every single statement. She read them at her kitchen table, in the same chair where she had sat 2 weeks after the parking lot, and typed case file. Mitchell into a blank document. She read them carefully, the way she read everything, absorbing every detail, feeling the full weight of every story. And when she had read them all, she sat quietly for a long time. Then she picked up her pen and started writing something new. She called it the Thompson Protocol. It was a reform framework, body cameras with mandatory unedited retention, independent auditing of all civilian complaints, anonymous federal reporting channels for officers who witnessed misconduct, and a structured review system that made it impossible for complaints to be quietly processed by the same desk sergeant twice. It was built from everything she had learned, from a recording, from Rebecca's network map, from 43 statements, and then 91, and then hundreds. James implemented the first version inside his own department within 60 days. Rebecca's division adopted a modified version for federal oversight purposes. 3 other cities had requested the framework within 6 months. Within a year, it was being studied in law school classrooms as a model for systemic reform. Not just a policy, but a blueprint for what happens when personal trauma is converted, with patience and precision and fury held perfectly in check, into lasting structural change. Mitchell was convicted on 7 federal counts. He received 12 years. He never understood, not really, what he had set in motion that night in the parking lot. He had looked at a woman alone in a nice car at midnight and seen someone defenseless. He had seen an opportunity. He had seen an easy target. He had not seen Vanessa Thompson. He had not seen 11 years of federal prosecution. He had not seen a husband who ran internal affairs, or a friend at the FBI, or a recorder already running before he finished his first sentence. He had not seen the patience, that deep, particular, terrifying patience of a woman who had spent her entire career watching arrogant men underestimate the evidence against them right up until the moment the verdict was read aloud. He had not seen any of it, and that, more than the recording, more than the ceremony, more than the cameras and the handcuffs and the federal charges, that was the thing that kept him up at night in the years that followed. He had chosen his target so carefully, and he had chosen so catastrophically wrong. Vanessa stood at the podium 3 months later, at a police reform summit attended by officials from 11 states. She was a closing speaker. The room was full, commissioners, advocates, law professors, journalists, and somewhere near the back, a group of women who had driven to the city from 4 different states just to be in the room. She looked out at all of them for a moment before she spoke. "The night this began," she said, "a man tried to make me feel powerless in a parking lot. And I want to be honest with you. For about 30 seconds, it worked." She paused. "And then I remembered what I know. That power used without accountability is not strength. It is borrowed time. And time," she said quietly, "always runs out." The room was completely still. "The best revenge," she said, "is not what happens to the man who wronged you. The best revenge is building something so solid, so transparent, so impossible corrupt, that the next woman in that parking lot never has to go through what I went through. That is the work. That is what we are here for." She stepped back from the podium. The applause started slowly, then built, and somewhere near the back of the room, the women who had driven from 4 different states were standing up, and then others were standing too, and the sound filled the room completely, warm and enormous and real. Vanessa looked down at her notes for just a moment. Then she looked up, and for the first time since that night under the yellow light in the parking lot, she allowed herself to smile. Not the courtroom smile, not the strategic smile, but the real one. The one James knew. The one that meant she was genuinely, deeply, at peace with how something had ended. Mitchell had wanted to make her feel small. Instead, he had made her unstoppable. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, give a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Justice doesn't always come easy, but when it comes for everyone.